Hello, Dan. How we doing?
Hello, John. Good, good.
So let's talk about speakers. So
Mm.
this past weekend, I heard two in very large settings. One was phenomenal, and one was, eh. But I know a lot of our audience, our clients, our prospects have speaking engagements. It's universal that some are better at it than others. But can you talk through what are some of the keys that make for a really good speaker and a really good experience for the audience?
Mm. Connection is the number one thing. How do you connect with your audience? I
Yes.
go to a lot of these lunch and learns or dinner and learns put on by the insurance industry or the financial planning industry. And I would say over the last year, the dozen or so that I've gone to, I can remember one or two that were really good. And when I think about those one or two, they always started with interacting with the audience. What questions might you have? What do you want to make sure that I cover? Why is this important to you? Versus, here's my 30 PowerPoint slide deck. I'm just going to march through that. So connection. Having said that, I do know, like, for instance, if you're doing a commencement speech, you can't do that with the audience. Hey, what do you guys want to hear? Right.
Yeah.
But I think figuring out who is your audience, what do they really want to hear? How can you make it entertaining? And one of the other things, so we've got connection as number one. Number two is use lots of stories. You know, when you tell stories, people relate, they remember those things. And I remember going to a prepaid funeral luncheon, right? And they were talking, and the thing I remember about that was they were saying things like, hey, what's the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery? What's the difference between a coffin and a whatever else you bury people in, and things like that, right? And it was intriguing, it was interesting, and it was different. And
Yeah.
so stories connect. Third thing is sometimes you have to say, here's the one, two, or three things you're going to learn from this speech, or the takeaways, right? And then just offer that. So those are the three things. Number one, connect. Number two, stories. Number three, give them, here's the things you're going to learn up front.
Yeah. One of the other things I've seen, so the engagement, the connection is interesting to me just because I think a lot of times speakers think it's great engagement content, and it's really just not. Because you could see the one speaker, he had the intention not just of the students who were graduating, but everybody in the audience was wondering where he was going to go next. And to your point, he was not just telling stories, he was a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And that really had an impact. But the other thing that good speakers have always said to me is they do dry runs. They practice the material, almost like Hollywood takes hey, this is something we're exploring, and they have a test audience to see if it lands well before they press forward with a big spend for it. Do some trial and error, present it to some people, get some reactions. You may think it's wonderful, or you may think it's not, but it lands the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So the role play side, the practice side.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think a lot of loved ones or employees will hear you practice, and they'll tell you all the great things about the speech, even though it's horrible.
Yep.
And they do a
Get yourself in
disservice.
front of some people that aren't motivated in that way.
Yeah. The last thing, and this is a free one, I won't charge you for this one, John. Sometimes when you're given a speech, either in the middle or towards the end, you interrupt that with a key point. And that's what really sticks in people's minds. And so I could be wrong on this. This just came spur of the moment, but I think it was Winston Churchill or somebody did a talk at a graduation where it was like, never, ever, ever give up. Right. And that was the statement. And that's what people remember from that speech. I don't really know if he said anything before or after. It's irrelevant. You remember that phrase. And so sometimes throwing out some phrase or a quick story or something that drives that point home, that's what people will latch on.
Almost like a hook in a
Bingo.
sales
That's
conversation.
it.
Yep.
Yes, exactly right.
All right, everybody. See you again tomorrow.
Take care.